New Thought Media Network proudly presents a weekly exploration of various spiritual practices with renowned spiritual authors, coaches, teachers, and Dr. Tracy Brown, RScP.
And now, here's Tracy.
Hey everybody, it is Tracy Brown, and you are here with poetry, prayer, and practice. Woo, I love this weekly opportunity to reground and recommit and remember that spiritual practice comes in so many different forms. And yeah, to rededicate my own thinking and time to spiritual practice in its many forms. Last week I mentioned that this week the focus was going to be on prayer. And at the time I said that, I had an idea in my mind about exactly what I was going to really focus on. And the closer I got to today, it's like, no, not going to do that, at least not yet. Talk about prayer in a different way. And over the weekend, I just happened to notice a book on my bookshelf that I had not looked at in a while. Handle with Prayer, Harnessing the Power to Make Your Dreams Come Through by Alan Cohen. And I love this little book. I just had not pulled it off the shelf in a long time, several years. But it didn't fall off the shelf, but visually, like it jumped out at me. And I picked it up, and I wasn't even thinking about poetry, prayer, and practice show. I was just like thumbing through it and going, oh yeah, I remember that. And oh yeah, I remember that. And oh, that section, yeah, was really good. And so as a result, we're going to talk about prayer today, but we're going to talk about it from the perspective that Alan Cohen has in this book, Handle with Prayer. Near the back of the book, he has a section titled The Technique of Prayer. Now, if you're familiar with Science of Mind, you know that there is a specific technique or technology called spiritual mind treatment, which is a technique for prayer. And if you're familiar with unity and unity principles, you know that unity has a 5-step technique for prayer. And so when I reread this section written by Alan Cohen, what I loved about it was that what he describes as the technique for prayer is broader than memorize these steps or implement these steps. It is still, here are the steps, but I'm thinking of another word, or I want to think of another word besides steps. Here are the elements, not so much instructional steps, but here are the 7 elements that go into being able to create and use prayer, so you actually are harnessing the power, the spiritual power. Now, I think all of the techniques I know do this, but I love that what Alan Cohen wrote was more generic in certain ways. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. And that's what I'm hoping will encourage you to review your prayer life, your prayer process, and your prayer technique. I believe that I have a great prayer practice. I do. And I still believe that over the weekend, as I was reading and then reviewing what Alan Cohen wrote, there were times when I was saying, oh yeah, I do that. And were times when I was saying, how do I do that? Like I had to think about it. And then I would be like, oh, well, that's the same as when I say this or when I do that. So you don't have to have a broken process or no prayer process at all for this to benefit you. And I'm going to jump right in instead of continuing to just talk about it. So in this book, Handle with Prayer by Alan Cohen, on page 179, he begins a section called The Technique of Prayer. And here's what he says at the beginning before he goes into the 7 elements that together create powerful prayer. Very first sentence in this chapter: prayer is spiritual in nature and scientific in process. Repeating, prayer is spiritual in nature and scientific in process. And I literally, when I read it over the weekend, I was like, yeah. And then I read it again, just that one sentence. And I just was like, let me think about that. And not think about it like analyze it, not that kind of think about it. Let me take that in. Yeah. Yeah. Spiritual in nature, scientific in practice. Because prayer is that activity where we are diving into the spiritual truth. We are excavating the spiritual truth. And when we have a repeatable way of practicing, diving in and excavating, that becomes very scientific. And it generates together. Those two things generate manifestation. Those two things generate peace. Those two things together generate the anchor for my life and hopefully for yours as well. So it becomes really, the word that's coming to me is powerful, when we realize or remember that prayer is both spiritual and scientific. And I think that becomes more evident the more you do it, right? And the more you learn to get out of the way, get the humanness out of the way, and really rely on the spiritual, because then you are recognizing that the spiritual truth is what you are connecting to, relying on, expecting to deliver peace, joy, wholeness, beauty, prosperity, love, right? It is that which is delivering all of that into your life, let alone any specific, tangible material things that you might be including in your prayer work. So that first sentence, prayer is spiritual in nature and scientific in practice. And then in the next paragraph, I have underscored, there are many routes to the mountaintop, and each of us must find the way that works best for us. So he acknowledges what I said earlier, like there are many different pathways, prayer pathways to peace, to manifestation, to being centered in spiritual truth. And each of us must find the one that works best for us. And what he does in this book is he shares what has worked best for him for many decades. So as I mentioned, he doesn't say there's 7 steps, like you do this and then you do this and then you do this, right? He doesn't do that. There are 7 elements that he puts together, and 7 elements that he presents as critical if you want your prayer life to be rich and full and to give you results. So the first element is the environment of prayer. The environment of prayer. While you can pray anywhere at any time, and real prayer leads to praying without ceasing, you can bolster your practice by creating an atmosphere conducive to prayer. By creating an atmosphere that is conducive to prayer. And then he goes on to write about creating an altar. Establish an altar area in your home. Dedicate a room, a section of a room, or at least a small table area as your altar. Choose a locale away from the activities of daily life, such as watching TV, work, eating, or normal conversation. The purpose of your altar is to, quote, build an energy that reminds you of God or spirit and brings you peace, end quote, but repeating, quote, build an energy that reminds you of God and brings you peace, end quote. I love that. Like in the following sentence, he says, just as we decorate our home with photographs and art that remind us of people and things we love, an altar lifts our thoughts to the divine. And I guess part of me never really thought about that, because I have more than one altar in my house, but I do have one main altar where I often meditate, and I never really thought of it as in a conscious way, as like decoration, or I have art all over my house, and here is the decoration that reminds me of God. I never really thought about that, but I have to laugh because at the same time, the places in my home where I have created an altar, I have been consciously aware of how it fits in with the overall decor of my home. But it's like, oh yeah, that is what I'm doing. I'm creating something that is visual and tangible, and a place that when I see that, or when I sit there, or when I light that candle, I am aligning myself with spirit. I am, and I know that, but I love the way that he phrases it. So the number one thing, the first thing that he mentions in creating an environment and building the overall technique of prayer in your life is to have an environment of prayer. And at the end of this section, I have underscored, do your prayer, meditation, chanting, or uplifting reading in this area so it builds up a healing vibration. And the moment you enter the area, you feel peaceful. And I can say yes. Yes, all three of my altars. I can take a breath and go so deep, especially my primary altar. I don't even sometimes have to take a breath. I can walk by it and just feel stress drain from my body. I can sit in the chair now after many years of building this energy and this environment. I can sit in the chair and it's like everything internally assumes the position, not the physical position, but it knows, oh, this is the communion with the deepest part of the soul, the truth, the essence of who I am. So I would agree with Alan Cohen. Obviously, I wouldn't have chosen to highlight and share what he has to say about prayer if I didn't agree with what he's written. But I agreed. Setting or establishing an environment is really important. So that's one of 7. I probably need to keep moving. Number 2, regular practice. Alan Cohen writes, prayer is a skill that you attain only by consistent practice. End quote. I could not agree with that more. I think you can pray without having a specific format. I believe that prayer is communion with and communication with the infinite intelligence that is invisible, formless, and ever present. And so while I very much love using spiritual mind treatment as my primary way of praying, this entire show exists because I also, in journaling, find that I write a lot of poetry that truly is a prayer. It's a prayer in a different format. And 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 it's important to me, to my communication and my grounding and my anchoring. And so wow, it's like, yeah, it's a skill to be able to get the human thinking out of the way and rest or relax or ground oneself in the spiritual conversation or communication. So it does require practice, even though I think it's as natural a thing as breathing. I do. I think that prayer is as natural as breathing, but as we grow up, we aren't necessarily taught that. And so when people say, oh, I take a long hike in the woods and I am praying, no words, just the experience of the long walk is a prayer. I believe that to be true. And whatever form we use for prayer, it requires practice for us to get our humanness out of the way and truly be in alignment with spiritual principle and truth. So for under regular practice, Alan Cohen talks about and recommends beginning each day with prayer. He answers, how long should you pray? When should you stop praying? And then pray also before going to sleep. And this is in this section under practice because I mean, I didn't ask him, but I think it's because in practice, he's indicating, like throughout the day, not just prayer is not something that you will become skilled at if you do it once a week, or to a certain degree once a day can become a discipline. But the more you integrate it throughout the day, the more you will develop the skill where it becomes your go-to. So he does explain it from his perspective, starting the day sets the tone for the day. Um, and you it's and for most of us it's powerful to choose that before we get into the day, and then make prayer our kind of save me from this human craziness, when we could establish the environment we want to have if we use prayer before we get into all the human doing. How long should you pray? His response: I have found that 20 minutes is the minimum time it takes to settle my mind and find the quiet place within me. If you are just starting out and 20 minutes seems burdensome, start with 5 and work your way up. If you are praying correctly, you will want to stay with it and enjoy its benefits. Some days you may sit for an hour. You will know. And that fits in with what he says later. So I'm going to just keep going for now. When should you stop praying? I love his answer. When you feel complete. When you feel complete, as if you have had a good meal for the soul and you feel nourished, whole, and positive. And then later in the section, he also says, pray also before going to sleep. And if even if that means you just sit quietly for a few moments and remember God, thank the source of love for your day, and invite it to be with you in your sleep. Number 3 of 7 elements in Alan Cohen's technique of prayer is relaxation. To set the stage for prayer or meditation, come into a relaxed state. And so he really just reminds us that this isn't work. It's not a job. It's not something you have to tough your way through. That it is and can be very relaxing. And we need to be and feel relaxed in order to allow the depth of who we are, of our very being, to be accessible. We can't be anxious, and because anxiety is connected to worry and fear and judgment, and right, that means we're still processing our being in the world from our human faculties. So number 3 is relaxation, and number 4 is concentration. And and even this weekend, I remember the very first time I was reading this book, but even this weekend, I was like, wait, relaxation, concentration, and you have them right next to each other. Aren't they like opposites? And my brain, my human brain, that's what its reaction was. And I chuckled just the way I just did. Like, no, they're not opposites. I want my body and mind to be relaxed, and that actually allows me to have clear, unobstructed concentration. And so in this section, he writes, begin your prayer session With a few moments of concentration, gaze at the flame of a candle. Observe your breath or say a mantra or affirmation. This will remove your attention from a million little things and distractions and put you on the inward path with resolve. So it's not concentration like analyzing. It's focusing your concentration on it's now time to go within through the breath, through looking at the flame of a candle, if you have a candle lit, and just observing it, letting your eyes direct the attention of your vision and your mind on one point of consciousness. And then you're ready to dive deeper. Number 5 of 7, contemplation. Alan Cohen writes, take an uplifting thought and let it ruminate in your mind so it lifts you into the consciousness of the divine. Affirmations such as, the peace of God is shining in me now, or all things are working together for good, or I am the beloved child of God, perfect, free, and whole. These will sink deep into your subconscious, remind you of the truth, and begin to reprogram negative imprinting. So contemplating your true essential nature, contemplating the truth of spirit, contemplating spiritual principle, that is what he means, and that's what he's referring to in contemplation. He does say that you can use creative visualization. So sometimes, if I am, well, there are lots of different reasons. Sometimes I will use a guided imagery, a recording of a guided imagery to like walk me through a process to go a little bit deeper if I'm really tired, or if I'm really stressed, having a very stressful or demanding day or week. Sometimes I will use that visualization to get me out of the chaos and into some peace. So he mentions that as a possibility while you are finding ways to be in contemplation. And he also says another practice you might enjoy is reciting a meaningful prayer or a psalm. And rather than simply mouthing rote words, take each line and feel the inner meaning of the verse. And he uses the Our Father prayer, Our Father who art in heaven prayer. It's like you may know that and you can recite it because you learned it when you were 7 years old and have used it your entire life. But if you're reciting it, stop, slow down. Not analyze what does it mean, but contemplate and allow for the deep, deep meaning of each line to sink in. Because remember, these are the techniques for prayer. We are putting ourselves in a prayerful environment. So we've talked about 5 of the 7 techniques. Number 6 is meditation. Quote, after you feel inspired and soul-filled, let go of the words and rest in the golden silence. End quote. I love that he says this. Like steps 1 through 5 are creating an environment, and your only goal is to feel inspired and to feel soulful, soul filled. Because once you are there, really consciously there, and your conscious and unconscious are together in that holy space, now in the human state, we might say, now the magic can happen. Now manifestation can occur. Now there is no barrier, because you have not just mentally remembered, but you have traveled to that place where there is no separation between you and that which created you. So in this part 6 of meditation, he writes, here you will find perfect peace that words cannot speak. Let go of aspiring toward God and become one with God. In this moment, beyond time, questions dissolve and all becomes clear. I love this. Like, I'm taking it in again right now. And I have felt that so many times in so many different ways during prayer and during meditation. And so that's the environment. That's what we're going for, because it gets our human brain out of the way, telling us all the things either we should want or how it should be and how it's going to happen. And it's like gone, just gone, fully aligned. And then in Alan Cohen's Handle with Prayer, number 7 in the technique of prayer is blessing. After you have basked in peace to your heart's content, take your positive energy and radiate it to the world. I love this next sentence. I'm actually going to print this out because I love it so much. And I want to be reminded of it over and over again, at least for the next week. Alan Cohen writes, roll out a golden carpet of love to prepare the way for your day, and invite all of your good to come to you in the right way and in the perfect time. Repeating, roll out a golden carpet of love to prepare the way for your day. I just love that. It's like, yes, that's what I'm doing with prayer. I'm rolling out a golden carpet that is a carpet of love, right? That's the carpet that I am walking on, and that's the carpet that everything that is coming to me is using to travel toward me. People, things, places, on a golden carpet of love. Okay, I'm loving that. Maybe you're rolling your eyes and going, really, Tracy, a golden carpet of love? But it's really resonating with me today. So, so I'm excited about it. If you are intent on healing or improving a specific aspect of your life, fill that scene with white light and thank God for establishing it in ideal harmony and balance. Hold in mind others for whom you are praying and enfold them in your vision of wholeness. Do not get caught up in the problem, but apply the healing consciousness to such persons and situations. Then broadcast love, blessings, and good wishes to all living things everywhere, and recognize the presence of God in all places at all times. That is the end of the chapter on the technique of prayer, and it also is the end of the book. Alan Cohen in Handle with Prayer does such a beautiful job of reminding us what prayer is, not what it's all about, but what prayer is. And I can highly, highly recommend this as a book. He gives great examples. He quotes from many different spiritual texts, and he shares examples from real people of how to use prayer in different situations. So, yeah. So that's today's poetry, prayer, and practice. My name is Tracy Brown, and I really hope that you have been able to think about how you use prayer, and if some of the ideas that Alan Cohen shares in that chapter of the 7 elements that really create altogether a technique for prayer, if some of that resonated with you or affirmed what you're already doing, then I invite you to just continue to build your practice of prayer. Please join me every Tuesday right here on the New Thought Media Network for poetry, prayer, and practice.
Thanks for watching. Join us again next week. Or watch on demand at www.ntmedia.org or youtube.com/newthoughtmedianetwork. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring. Learn more at www.ntmedia.org.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network, come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.